The year is 2010. I'm sitting in my 3rd grade classroom. My teacher, who in 1 year's time will write me up for being in the bathroom at the same time as a kid making a ruckus, asks me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I answer, "A zookeeper." Today, 13 years later, I work at a grocery store and talk about anime on the internet. Atelier Ryza, Ever Darkness and the Secret Hideout is a JRPG published by Koei Tecmo and released in 2019 for the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and Steam. Following the most feminine presenting tomboy I've ever seen, 17-year-old, yes 17, are we really surprised, Rysalind Stout, or Ryza for short, sets out on a journey alongside her childhood friends Lent Marslink and Tal Mongarten. The three itch for adventure and to see more of the world beyond their rural island village. And when two mysterious people named Empel Valmer and Leela the Cyrus show up in their hometown of Kirken Island, a journey they can never forget awaits. Fast forward to 2023, with 2 direct sequels under its belt, the first Atelier Ryza game, very unsurprisingly, was announced to be getting an anime adaptation. And since that adaptation is being released the day this video goes up, I figure I'd talk all about it. Hello all, my name is Godzi, and today we're gonna discuss the potential that the Atelier Ryza anime has. Or in some cases, likely doesn't. To give a little more information on the story and gameplay, let's rewind back to the original game. The game's story follows the minor child reminder not of legal age, Ryza. God, do I hate the internet. At least she's 20 and 21 in both respective sequels, matures as a person an absolute shit ton during the trilogy, and her outfit in Ryza 1 is far less provocative compared to her Ryza 2 outfit. Her Ryza 3 outfit is okay. The bar is in hell though. The over-sexualization of teenage anime girls aside, the story follows Ryza, a passionate and selectively intelligent teenage girl who acts dim-witted most of the time, despite being somehow one of the smarter characters in this franchise, alongside her aforementioned childhood friends. To put it short, Lent is the brawn and Tao is the brains, down to the most stereotypical stereotypes. Lent is headstrong and craves battles, while Tao is mind-strong and craves hardcovers. Fighting as a trio, the three sneak off their island to the mainland, where they don't really have any destination in mind, they just want to explore and fight monsters. After a short little adventure, they come across a blonde girl named Claudia Valence being attacked by monsters. They save her, and she later joins them on their journey, fighting with a flute. Alright. She's a very kind and gentle girl of a high-class upbringing who also craves a little bit of chaos in her life. But what really kickstarts Ryza and Co.'s adventure is them meeting Empel Valmer and Leela the Cyrus. A mysterious pair. Empel is a scholarly alchemist who craves sweets, and Leela is a hardened warrior who craves breast reduction surgery. Seriously, what is this game's problem? Ryza finds an interest in alchemy, Empel teaches her, and she uses alchemy over the course of the rest of the game to deal with threats of monsters, and to help people in her town. The rest of this video is going to include some light spoilers for the rest of the game's story. Nothing huge will be revealed here, just some light stuff. After the game truly gets started, we find that the story revolves mostly around the history of an ancient civilization known as the Clint Kingdom, and the alchemists that existed at that time, as well as a strange gate on the cove that leads to the underworld, where a strange race of monsters known as Felucia live, and end up escaping the underworld and becoming a threat to Kirken Island and the people on it. Exploring a variety of environments on the mainland, including a rundown castle, a maple forest, a sunken cave, and a looming tower, among others. All things considered, it's not a super deep story, and despite having rich lore, the specific story of the actual game's run is not terribly deep. As for the gameplay, Ryza 1 is a seemingly standard JRPG focusing on the exploration of linear areas where you can fight monsters and gather materials in order to craft items using the alchemy system. Parts of the game are treated like a Metroidvania, as certain areas are locked behind different tools and equipment, while others are locked behind simple story progress. Okay, so that's a good enough summary of the game. I mean, there are more mechanics and characters, but really that's all the important shit to understand the basics of the game and what it actually is. So now, for the main course. Will the Atelier Ryza anime be good? Well, in order to answer that question, we need to answer a different one. Is the Atelier Ryza game good? That brings me to yet another question. We'll hit them beat by beat, don't worry. Why am I the person talking about this? Who am I? Where are you? Why does your upper left eyelid itch? Well, I am Godzi, and I like these games. I've played the games. I've yet to beat Ryza 3, but we're only talking about Ryza 1 here, so... I find it weird that despite these games being relatively ingrained into the public consciousness of people who like anime-styled video games, I wonder what that is, not many people have actually played it, let alone its sequels. Granted, this happens a lot. After all, why else is Don't Mess With Us Persona 5 fans, we never actually played Persona 5, a meme? Y'all are weak as shit. I, a person who actually plays video games that I like, do hereby proclaim that Atelier Ryza 1 is a good video game. But the second game is better. So now we can answer whether or not the Atelier Ryza anime will be good. By answering a completely different question. What makes Atelier Ryza 1 a good game? After all, games and anime are very different mediums. I mean, picture a Breath of the Wild anime, for example. Could that be good? Maybe. But would it capture the same feeling as the game? Nope, not at all. Breath of the Wild is good because of its design philosophy allowing you to go anywhere and do anything after the game's prologue, whereas an anime would be forced onto a linear path. So now we need to answer that question for Atelier Ryza. As someone who enjoyed Atelier Ryza, what makes it a good game? To answer it as bluntly as possible, not the story. I do like the characters, don't get me wrong, but so much of the characterization in this game feels completely separate from the conflict. Sure, the general theme of the characters wanting to leave their island for something more exciting only to end up being the sole line of defense between a race of underworld beasts and their home is good and I like it. But the specific lore about the alchemists of the past and the Clint Kingdom only feels somewhat connected to the main cast. The alchemists of the past only matter to Ryza because she's a very empathetic alchemist, and the Clint Kingdom only matters to Tal because he's very invested in reading about the past and is a big nerd. Lent doesn't have any specific ties to the overall conflict, and his character really doesn't get explored any further until the second and third games. And Claudia's arc is very, very disconnected from the story, mostly only being discussed rarely in the main story and primarily in the first half, or during side quests. Other than the main four, Empel and Leela, the only other character that matters much to the overall story is Boss Brunin, a former friend of Ryza & Co.'s who serves as an antagonistic force to the daily lives of Ryza & Co. on the island. And while his character changes a lot over the course of this game, he's not super central to the main story, and any other character who's presented as if they will be is an absolute footnote at most points in the game. So if the story isn't what makes me love the game, then it must be the gameplay. And you'd be right. I loved exploring this world, grabbing materials, making new and stronger items, finding new ways to explore, creating new tools, fighting stronger and stronger monsters, getting terrified by optional bosses, leveling up and learning new skills, finding new mechanics, completing quests, finding treasures both hidden and not so hidden, and of course, searching for fucking hours until I could actually find some of the particular items I was searching for. Who knew a flower could be hidden so well? But seeing areas I couldn't reach, enemies I couldn't beat, recipes I couldn't make, and quests I couldn't complete, only to be able to later accomplish any of those tasks later in the game, was super satisfying. The world is rich with things to do, areas to explore, materials to find, and experiences to, well, experience. This doesn't bode very well for the anime. I'm going to be completely honest here. I don't think this anime will be all that fantastic. It looks beautiful. The game's character designs translate exceptionally well into the style of this anime, and parts of the PV make it look like it's going to focus more heavily on the characters and how new they are to fighting monsters on the mainland and adventuring. I think if they stick to this idea of focusing as much as possible on showing the characters' growth over the course of the story, they could make the anime very good as a standalone. But I'd be wrong in saying that it would be a good alternative to the game. More so, it'd be a separate thing. I know how that might sound, but the game's story really does feel like a disconnected thing from the gameplay. They're very likely not going to lose to a boss, teleport back to the hideout, and grind for 2 hours in order to go back and beat the boss. No, they're going to beat the boss on their first try. They're not going to explore areas for an hour looking for a specific ingredient, grind items for better weapons, or get exploration items to find hidden landmarks, treasures, materials, and optional bosses. But does any of this mean that the anime won't be good? It can still be faithful, have the charm of the game, and show the wonder of its world in addition to focusing more on the characters and attempting to make the story more engaging. Of course the anime can be good, that was barely a question from the first place. Anything can be a bad adaptation of something good, or very rarely vice versa. Of course it's possible. This is really more so a question of, well, you can read titles. Will it be good? Well, the answer is we obviously don't know yet. We can only discuss potential. We can think of the boss fights and how they'd be adapted into not being just turn-based combat. We can think of how they'll shorten a 40-hour game into a 12 to 24 episode anime. We can... Wait, that's actually worth discussing. A big part of anime adaptations of games is the disparity in length. Manga series occasionally have more leeway, as rarely are the stories they're adapting actually finished. Whereas games, the vast majority of the time, release as completed stories or completed segments of a story. I like referring to the adaptation of Umineko when thinking about game adaptations. Umineko's anime adapted the first half of the overall story, 70 plus hours worth of raw text, into 26 episodes that run about 24 minutes each, turning 70 hours into just over 10. While I won't rag on everything the Umineko adaptation did, it was bold to assume that they can make a justifiable adaptation of the story in that small amount of time. Of course, not every adaptation needs to be one-to-one or follow the same linear path as what it's adapting. But that does still bring up the question of whether or not the anime will be able to adapt the story in a way that's paced fairly. It can be fast, it can be slow, it just needs good pacing, not identical to the game pacing. Well, 12 episodes might cut it close, unless they speed things up and cut corners in conversation. But 24 episodes honestly feels too long. I feel like 16 to 18 episodes would be perfect, if they only cover story content, which, again, I feel like that would be a mistake if their intention is to adapt the game rather than just the game's story. Some of the side content would be nice. Taking a slower pace matches the game's charm, and some major parts of the game aren't even explored in the main story. Quests aside, an entire area of the map in the Maple Delta has zero main story relevance. You can literally completely avoid going there ever and still beat the game. But I like that area. It's one of the most memorable from the game. Hell, it's the most memorable area from the game, and I don't even remember any of the quests that involved it. Atelier Ryza is about taking your time, chillin', and adventuring through a variety of beautiful environments. I don't think ignoring the gameplay and world of Atelier Ryza to instead focus on the bare-bones story is worth the time. Even then, the story would still have more content in the game, with more lore to find, longer conversations to be had, more conversations to be had, quests to do, areas to discover and study. The anime would just be a straight shot of linear content that condenses the game's story. Again, it could be more engaging, but at what cost? I want to see Ryza and co. attempt to take down strong monsters that were optional in the original game. I don't want to see them breeze through everything because game overs aren't canon. Hell, there's no such thing as a game over in any of the 3 games. You can lose to the literal final boss, and you just white out like it's a Pokemon game and go back to the boss when you're stronger. But I just know when they get to the final boss in this adaptation, they'll beat it first try. And that upsets me. Another major consideration that I've hinted at several times during this video is the reputation that this series has. Atelier Ryza is part of the general anime game sphere, not because of the games, but primarily because of the 34th rule of the internet. Ever since people saw this character design, they'd been going ham on the art for literal years. Despite the fact that she's a minor in this game? Yes, despite the fact that she's a minor in this game. And the franchise hasn't been shy about fan service in the games and promotional material. I mean, why else would they sell DLC swimsuits for the playable characters and put camel toe on their swimsuit Leela figure? Queerbait art of Ryza and Claudia, Ryza 2 and 3 having wet versions of the playable characters, weird camera angles and cutscenes and when navigating some parts of the map, jiggle physics, and a literal skill in Ryza 3 called Milky Way. I know Ryza's skills have lunar and astral naming conventions, but giving a character that looks like this a skill called Milky Way, when these two have been common targets of giant boobification and internet porn for years now, just for being women associated with milk in video games? Even though Ryza has never had a skill with the word galaxy in it? Come on. Now, I'm not trying to slander the franchise as nothing but cheap fan service, as the game doesn't literally try to push TNA in your face unless you're crawling through a small gap. It's very show don't tell with the 4 particularly busty female character designs, and I'd be lying if I said there wasn't content for the boy kissers of the world. However, the franchise has never been shy about marketing, and that worries me like crazy for the anime. The initial PV never really had anything on a caliber that I'd call overt, but more recently, I mean, what am I supposed to tell you? The games do this often enough, and now they have even more freedom with camera angles and character poses. Well, let's just hope they don't make it so blatant throughout the rest of the show. Something else I could discuss is the potential that the franchise has for adaptations of the 2nd and 3rd games, to which my gut reaction is no, fuck no. While Ryza 3 is much more story-heavy and Ryza 2 has a marketable mascot character, both of these games still rely a shit ton on exploration to help tell their stories. Ryza 2 is about exploring ancient ruins and piecing together mysteries of a distant past, while Ryza 3 has you exploring borderline open-world maps with tons of secrets and discoveries, packed into an even longer game with even more characters to flesh out. Ryza 1 has a bit of potential, and that's really as far as it goes. All things considered, my hopes for this anime are pretty low. There's potential, and the show does look beautiful, but so does the game. Play the game! Play Ryza 2 and 3 as well. Even if the anime ends up being fantastic by some miracle, play the games! There's no feeling quite like getting chased by a giant weasel or turning a corner to see an ethereal being sitting atop a throne. These games are about adventure, discovery, and friendship, creating something to care about. And hey, if they have that mentality around the anime, maybe it'll be good. I'll still watch it. Let's just hope they don't completely fuck it up. Let's just hope. Thank you for watching. I have nothing to plug here other than my Twitter. Play the Ryza games. Bye-bye!